Okay. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm going to introduce our guest, Piotr Szyhalski. Polish-born, U.S.-based multimedia artist Piotr Szyhalski has, in the past decade, established the Labor Camp, an ongoing art project that includes interactive components, digital and physical, original music, performances, videos, printed ephemera, texts, a blog, and an archive of online resources. Moving between fine arts, painting, photography, drawing, installation, sound, media, art, and design, Szyhalski's multilayered works often explore communication, exchange, extreme historical phenomena, and the relationships between the individual and society, history, and time. His work has been exhibited worldwide at such venues as the International Center of Photography, the New York Expo Film Festival, Siggraph, ISEA Paris, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, and the San Jose Museum of Art, and Experimenta Design in Lisbon, Portugal, and featured in a variety of catalogs and publications. His pieces are in the collections of the Walker Art Center, the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and others. Szyhalski has been the recipient of the McKnight Artist Fellowship for Visual Artists. In addition to his own performance-based projects, he was commissioned to develop large-scale interactive live projections for Wim Mertens Quartet in Brussels, the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, and Vocal Essence. He released 2 CDs as Labor Camp Orchestra for the Multimedia Installations Theater of Operations. So that's the important boilerplate. You can judge a tree by its fruit. As many of you know, there's a bizarre idea common among civilians that art is opinion-based, that there are no criteria, no stable criteria, no principles for the evaluation of works of art. That idea populates popular culture. Pardon me. In other words, opinion seems to be the order of the day with regard to works of art. I like that because, I don't like that because. I'm sure you heard all of that before you came to Cranbrook, as an example. And if only things were that simple, right? As many of you must know by now, the evaluation of art and subsequently artists can be thought of more accurately, I think, as principle-based. And this is where the you can judge a tree by its fruit thing comes in. One of the principal ways of judging the importance of any work of art, and subsequently the artist, is the idea of fecundity, the capacity to produce offspring. Important works populate across culture and across time. In my opinion, Peter is an important artist and educator. The facts, as I'm about to lay them out, suggest that his work and his ideas are fecund. Fact. And I'm going to have the biological understanding of what I'm about to say. You may not, but trust me, over the course of the past 17 years that I've been at the Academy, it's Piotr Szyhalski who has been cited as an important mentor, catalyst, and artist by more students across more disciplines at the Academy than any single artist. And I'm referring to the personal connection that he has with students. So I'm not referring to artists found in books. I'm saying that across the Academy, regardless of discipline, it's his name that over the 17 years that I've been here has come up and been cited as an important mentor or catalyst in the lives of the students. From the 2D department alone, Peter was absolutely instrumental in the early development of a handful of the strongest students that I've had the honor of passing through the 2D department, from Keitra Dixon, who in the mid-aughts became an international graphic design star, to Joshua Walton and his interactive multimedia and programming-based work, to Justin Baxey, and to Jonathan Keller. In the sculpture department, Peter was I think had a fairly profound impact on Anthony Jeremiah Warnock. While in print media, I think there was an important influence on our friend Lindsay Splickle. To name just a few of the Cranbrook students who have mentioned his name as an important influence. These are the first that came to mind while I was sitting here. To name a few more artists outside of the direct Cranbrook orbit that artists who have personally mentioned to me, surprisingly in some ways, Peter's importance in their development, the international street art graffiti phenomenon, FAIL, the collaborative duo who currently show at Library Street Collective, among other places, and who have major works all over the globe, have stated to me how important their early interactions with Peter were in their development. So I go back to the idea that you can judge a tree by its fruit. It's my great pleasure, and I mean this with every fiber of my being, to spend time with you and to be able to share your work and your influence to the Academy and to my students. So help join me in welcoming Peter.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy. That's crazy talk, Mr. Earls. So, can you hear me? Hello? Yes? Do I need to lean or is this okay if I talk like that? Yeah? Good. Yeah, that's nuts. I don't know. We were just talking about how awkward the introductions are and just awkward to do them, awkward to listen to it and all that. But, you know, I really do appreciate the sentiment, especially the idea of acknowledging this really special relationship that we get to engage with our students in. And yeah, it's funny. I don't know why, but earlier, was it last night at the dinner? One thing led to another. No, was it at the dinner that I was reminiscing about my drawing teacher who would be drunk during the classes and erase the drawings as a way of critiquing them? Yeah. Well, you know, those relationships don't always work out the way we want them to, but when they do, it really is special. So anyway, I have a logistical question. How long is this lecture supposed to be? 1 hour? Okay. So it's always the case, I never know really what to focus on, what to spend more time on, and I can't show you everything, so I'll just show you a bunch of stuff. But in the past few years, I sort of adopted this one model where I would just go very, very quickly through a lot of stuff, just maybe saying 1 or 2 words about things, and then spending a little more time talking about a few maybe more recent projects. And so to do that, I'm going to use an exhibition that I set up at this amazing place in Minneapolis called the Soap Factory as a way of kind of organizing and talking to you about the relationships between the projects and kind of ideas that emerged from that, because there are a few really, to me, important ideas that sort of were born out of that experience for me. So having said that, this is going to be the sort of a quick run through a lot of much older work. Sometimes I really can't tell how old these things are, but so these are roughly organized in a couple of groups. These are initially about some of the sound projects, the physical interfaces that I ended up building to present the work that was, essentially immaterial. These were often referred to as the labor camp study rooms because they utilized pieces of furniture that were repurposed for listening to sound. So in this case, a blackboard with jack inputs and headphones that you could repatch and access different pieces of sonic information. Oh yeah, and I also want to say that if you want me to stop and elaborate or anything, please do say so. I always tell people this, no one ever does that, but I always hope that there could be a shred of something that feels like a conversation happening rather than just me rambling on, okay? See, like no one says it. It's just, I conversation is a good thing. So more of these labor camp study rooms, performances that were constructed more specifically to present sonic projects, the stuff that Elliot was referring to as the labor camp orchestra, the sonic branch of the labor camp project. I was very proud of this image. My daughter's white Play-Doh and roses and a statue of Mao. Some early interfaces. This was a very transformative project for me. The first time I was able to actually make something that sounded like music, but entirely programmatically, so without necessarily a traditional musical training. Those are some of the pieces for the orchestras that Elliot mentioned also. This is for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. So quickly scanning through images. This is a performance in Lisbon, performance at the Walker. These are some early projects, collaborative projects with high school students. For a moment, I thought I'd be interested in teaching high school. We developed custom software. You can tell how old the projects are by the user interface from Mac from like, I don't know how old. This is like OS 9 maybe. Incredible. So events, works on paper, some strange paper shirt I made. Leaflets, I do want to talk a little about leaflets, because leaflets are one of my beloved printed matter formats. I design leaflets to this day, and had been working on leaflets basically for more than 20 years now. And sometimes they are connected to classes, sometimes they're connected to particular events, and other times they become their own projects, their own artworks. One thing that I always like to, so this is, actually, let me stop this for a second so that I can tell you a little bit more about this. So this guy right there, you see him? Can you see him? Yes, yeah. I don't know his name, but this is an image that's lifted directly from these printed track pieces. Do you know what religious tracts are? Have we ever heard the term track evangelism? You know, the guys that would come up to you on the street and stick a piece of paper in your hand and talk to you about God. That's an image from one of the ephemera printed by Osterhuus Publishing House. This is an amazing, really old track evangelism place in Minneapolis that I sort of stumbled upon accidentally. And that figure of the guy just throwing the pieces of paper around somehow captured my attention. I always wanted to be that guy, and I always thought that in some ways I was able to be him by working on the internet. The internet feels like a public space where you get to toss these pieces of paper. But at the same time, I'm really interested in the actual pieces of paper. So I brought this one project that consists of these two leaflets. And you will see in a second that the first one I'm going to share with you is a replica of one of the leaflets that the coalition forces distributed in Iraq. So this is the gesture that I just love. Okay, so this is literally a replica of one of those leaflets that on one side was designed to look like a dinar note. On the other side, it delivered this cryptic message: honor will never be regained, no matter what the cost is. And I just translated that in English and made a $20 bill version of it, thinking that the message seems to work. So in this case, I do consider this a self-contained project. And this particular piece would have been either delivered by hand, like I just did, or distributed using these automated leaflet distribution devices. And this is a little video that shows you how those function in a public space. And then after that, you will see a little quick video of them in a museum space. Both of those are substitutes for dropping these out of the airplane, because that's one project that I'm yet to do. I will show you one more thing about it. So if you drop this leaflet from the airplane, see how it starts to rotate in this particular way? This is a auto-rotating leaflet design. It's a scientific formula that considers the weight of the paper and the proportions of the sheet of paper that I've learned about from the psychological operations field manual by the U.S. Army. And yes, 100%. This is the auto-rotating leaflet this is the design that's why I said that I love the format, because it comes sort of packed with this sinister agenda. And some of the projects that I ended up working with leaflets, confront that directly. Others just use the context as a kind of propelling device in advancing the message. But so to this day, every time there's an opportunity for an exhibition anywhere, the first thing I propose is the airplane leaflet drop. And in San Jose, it almost happened, except just at the last 2 months, I think, the idea was nixed because of I could not with 100% certainty confirm that the leaflets will drop where we want them to drop. I said gust of wind and things, go haywire, and then that was the thing that broke the project. That's why I ended up building these dispensers, but in a way, I was happy with the fact that I was sort of forced in trying to figure out different ways of bringing this kind of a silent, underhanded presence of these messages into these different environments. I still want to do the airplane drop, and someday it's going to happen. But all right, so grow through scattering. This is the guy and the leaflet project. These are super old design pieces that were printed as contact pieces, so designs cut out of black paper, glued to a piece of glass, and contact printed on a photo paper. So essentially photograms, but something that allowed me to explore these different approaches to the technique, using paint, painting, scratching in, kind of creating a range of aesthetic vocabulary that I was very interested in at the time. So these were both printed as small postcards, but also large poster pieces, big lino prints, printed, and this is maybe an interesting piece of information. So these lino cut pieces were printed, huge, carved out of the recycled linoleum from the floor of one of the dorm rooms in my school. So that was maybe one of the first moments where I connected the idea of scale with the sort of repurposing of materials. I'll come back to this later as I talk to you about this show at the Soap Factory. This is a series of pieces that are painted on these odd canvases that I found many years ago in Minneapolis that were all stamped as something that was assembled at the School for the Blind. And I was considering the idea of these paintings being a kind of a collaboration with people who, unable to see, assembled the canvases that then became the sort of foundation for these images. The visuals and the texts were in that previous body of work also connected to the messaging from the leaflets from the coalition forces during the first Iraq War. So there's a whole range of these stencil paintings that I've been working on using these small canvases. You see similar themes in these interactive murals. I love painting murals. I've done murals for a number of years. These were sort of painted pieces that also had interactive components, like that text on the top is sensitive to the change of the traffic lights outside of the gallery in which the mural is located. in this particular mural in the back, there's this sort of animation that's happening that is responding to the positions of the audience in the space. These are some older murals that are just that. Massive paintings. This is a large one in the, at the MIA in Minneapolis that sort of towered over these small exhibition spaces in which different interactive installations were housed. This is the exhibition version of the project I was talking about earlier. The dolphin piece that ultimately ended up at the Walker for a number of years, early experiments with artificial intelligence. This is a kind of a cool project that happened a number of years ago. So this is how old this project is. The idea for it, and this is sort of the luxury of designing a project for a space that has a built-in multiple viewings. This happened at the gallery at the school that I teach at, right? So I knew for how long the exhibition will run, and I divided the entire run of the exhibition by the number of faculty, staff, and people, and the students at school at the time. And everybody would have their name presented for, it ended up being a few minutes, combined with a randomly selected date within a decade following the current date, right? So right now, obviously, we are already past these years, but I loved what happened with the exhibition, and that the pictures that you're seeing are the photographs that the people who are, this project also had the biggest label ever, because the label contained information about every single time slot with everybody's name, so you could look up when your name will be on the wall with this beautiful flower arrangement. So people would just show up and take their own pictures with the little memorial of themselves. More dolphin, the Walker. The spleen that was brought up last night. Unfortunately, I don't have a good illustration of this crazy feedback thing that happened with the audience hijacking the spleen's feedback page to discuss their medical problems related to spleen, but some of you already heard the story, so I'm not going to bore you with that. This is one of the projects that was commissioned early by the Walker Art Center, I think the first online or interactive work commission at the Walker in the 90s. Electric Posters here is one of the very, very first projects I did online in the 90s as well. This idea of expanding the poster format with just a very rudimentary animation that complicated the layers of meanings in just a short sort of time intervals, unfolding these messages, but also an opportunity to experiment with lots of different aesthetics, different ideas, visual ideas, typographic ideas, et cetera, et cetera. So some crazy things. A lot of images of my family. This is me and my daughter. So like very tight sort of family affair, I would say. That's me and my wife. These are some early, still interactive pieces, screen-based pieces, but a little more complex or richer in terms of the sound engagement. So not so much web-friendly, because back then you had to compress everything to like 2K in order, if you wanted it downloaded. So this is actually, most of the stuff, what you are seeing is what I have to show for, a couple of screen grabs. It's not, none of this seems to be working at this point. So this is a sort of an online project where people were able to generate these posters. A piece I did for Bjork. This one was for Smashing Pumpkins, of all things. This is Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes and I are like this. This project, I got to stop for a second because this was really amazing to me. When we were preparing to work on the project with Bjork, there's a very subtle sound layer to this interactive piece that you're just seeing 4 screen grabs from. And while licking her lips, Bjork said that she really liked the sound in this project. And I thought, oh, this is a compliment. This was a special moment for me. Yeah, so this is more sort of like large, this was meant to be a projected interactive piece. This is interface for a first online class that I taught on propaganda art. This is another performance from the Walker. There's me throwing leaflets 20 years ago. Different performance shots. And then this is a series of these small reactive projection experiments that I've developed for live musical performances, each being a different sort of approach to generating live visuals fed by 6 streams of varied MIDI data. So probably one of the last projects that I did that really seriously concerned itself with screen-based interaction and or sort of reactive environments. So that, I think, is the end of this set. Any questions? All right. So I'm going to go now into this exhibition at the Soap Factory and spend a little more time talking about the specific pieces there. So it's called the 3 factory pieces because the initial proposal stipulated that I would do these 3 large-scale installations in these 3 main spaces of the Soap. This is the main entrance is right here. This is referred to as Gallery 1. This is referred to as Gallery 2. This is Gallery 3. It's a beautiful old industrial space. An environment that I always wanted to work within, and it wasn't until I think maybe 2013, 14, where I just decided to put together a proposal and make a pitch to the gallery with some semi-concrete ideas, which then worked out, and the exhibition happened. And I was very happy about this, and I thought it might make sense to actually show you the pitch document that that was part of that experience. I don't know if that sounds interesting. Do you want to see what I actually had to propose to the gallery? All right. Yes. 3 factory pieces, right? So I'm not going to read this whole introduction to you. For one thing, I can't even see it on my screen. But the gist of it was, and my objective, I guess, was to create an exhibition that housed both a number of projects, but also felt like a sort of a continuous narrative. And so I thought of a number of through lines that connected the spaces, whether physically or conceptually. That video that you were seeing in the very beginning of the talk, of these rolling bodies, was one of those formal gestures that connected all the spaces. Each one of the 3 galleries had a number of walls where that video played continuously, sort of weaving through these 3 spaces. But the 3 factory pieces were roughly described in this way. This is one of the ideas where I was intrigued by the fact that the main floor of the gallery was hovering over spaces that were largely left untouched since the time the soap factory was a soap factory. And so right underneath Gallery 3, there was, for example, what was referred to as the coal room. And I have a thing for coal, being a Pole. You might have heard about the new climate crisis, not climate conference that was in Poland, and the idea of talking about the coal as this amazing resource continued there to everybody's amazement. Anyway, so the idea here was that there would be a station on the gallery floor where the audience member would be able to perhaps read a book or sort of review some kind of printed matter text while wearing headphones that would be wired directly to me underneath the floor, shoveling coal while wearing the binaural microphones, right? So the connection between me and this other person would be very direct, and if you ever experienced the recordings made with binaural microphones, they really create a sense of space like nothing else. So my idea was literally that while people will be reading, they will be listening to this labor happening underneath their feet through my ears. That was the idea for the piece, and I wanted to do this every day that the gallery is open, so people would be unaware of the fact that I am underneath literally killing myself slowly. The other idea was to look at, this was the series that I called The Gates, and it was further acknowledging the fact that there are these two levels of the gallery. The main floor had this sort of rough quality about it, where there would be holes in the floor that you could literally see right through, and I wanted to develop a series of projects that acknowledged and took advantage of the fact that that passage through these layers of spaces is there. So it was called The Gates, and these pieces of fabric are the same material that I showed you these paintings, the canvases that were assembled by the School for the Blind. So these, after a little bit more investigation, turned out to be the surgical drapes. So you see those little openings on the tables. I'll get back to this later, but so surgical drapes with openings and holes in the floor connecting the two floors. And then the third of the three factory pieces would be some form of this large-scale printing scenario. I've been printing these posters. I brought some for you later. After the lecture, I'll give you some prints. But the idea was that I wanted to create a printing situation where the relief matrix for the print would be the size of the floor of one of those galleries, right? So you would literally have to walk on the floor, on the matrix, unroll the paint, and move giant sheets of some sort of material to make these relief prints. And the concept, I guess, there was that in order to see this thing, you have to print it, and it is so large that you have to work with somebody else to do it. So that was the sort of loose direction for this project. So that was the proposal. I included in the proposal two other pieces of information. This is a few shots of these surgical drapes so that you have a better sense of what these are. And then this artifact, this photograph that was apparently taken in early 90s in China somewhere, in one of the labor camps that, for all we know, could still be operational. And those three questions that you can see on this billboard ask you these questions. Who are you? What is this place? And why are you here? And you're supposed to answer them. I'm a criminal. This is the labor camp. And I'm here to reform through labor. But what did strike me about these questions is that thinking about them outside of this particular context, they are these sort of deep existential questions that, if projected to a different audience, end up resonating in very, very different ways. And that discrepancy, that context specificity, connection to particular cultural environment, really changing those questions. Kind of like what happened with these leaflets, right? Where the same message resonates very differently in different cultural contexts. So that was an important sort of starting point for the projects in the soap factory. So, like I said, the video was one of the elements that connected, that sort of snaked its way all the way from the very first thing you saw when you entered the gallery number 1 and the last thing you saw in the gallery 3. So these rolling videos. There was also this subtle sonic treatment with these cymbals that were mounted on several walls throughout the 3 galleries that were all operated from this one brain that sort of generatively created these percussive patterns that would move through the space. So always originating in gallery 1 and kind of sonically guiding you into the space of gallery 3. So small solenoids run by these voltages coming from this small modular setup. So those were the ideas that sort of, the through lines that connected the spaces. Now, the 3 galleries, to me, had very distinct character and delivered different experiences. The first gallery, to me, was the one that operated in the most confrontational way. The piece that occupied that entire space that I called Them was sort of born out of my frustration of watching the unfolding of the Occupy Wall Street movement. These are some of the photographs that I found on the internet of the people sort of sipping champagne while the demonstrators in front of the Wall Street building are being brutalized by police. That tension sort of brewed in a way a very specific set of reactions, and I would just write these things down on my iPad, and what you're looking at is a selection of few of this just simple statement that when I wrote them, I wasn't really intending to use in any particular way for a project, but when that Soul Factory exhibition rolled around, I thought this was maybe the opportunity for that confrontational message. The big idea being that as you move through the exhibition, the tenor of the messaging changes from the screaming and confrontation to a kind of a whisper and a connection, perhaps. So the two Gallery 1, Gallery 3 pieces are text-driven, but in very different ways. So this was the material that I brought to the Gallery 1, and that was the gallery where I thought a couple of images, and that was the gallery that was going to deliver this idea of the large-scale printing. This didn't quite work out the way I intended, in that the floor isn't the matrix. I ended up sort of building a different scenario where this contraption that you see in the middle becomes this a thread, a kind of a continuing thread of this awesome, weird material that I somehow that I own at this point. It was a free material that somebody donated to my school. Nobody knew what to do for years. These spools of probably thousands of yards of this material would be sitting in the shop. And when confronted with this idea of making massive prints, I thought, okay, this is the material for it. And so there's this roll, and so you can unroll this material and then use these pieces of foam, a foamular material, one of my favorite materials these days, that I cut out a kind of a letter set, right? So essentially, effectively creating this very large, dysfunctional letterpress machine, right? Where one character at the time, I was able to write out the messages and then sew them together. So you're seeing 4 layers of this material. So these prints are about 3 feet long and approximately 12 feet tall. So the idea of making ginormous prints definitely happened, although as the sort of logistics of the install were being confronted, it had to take a different form. And in retrospect, I'm very glad that it did, because it sort of produced a very different kind of quality that I'll talk to you about a little later. So these are the 3 messages from my list that were printed, and I basically asked the staff there which messages we should be printing, and of course they immediately picked the one with the profanity as the first one that we should print, and we printed that one, and then they selected 2 more. So part of this was also the idea that the collective printing was still happening, and definitely part of the dynamic of the so what you're looking at is the printing that happened during the opening. And then the exhibition also stipulated a number of events, collaborative events, that were scheduled along the run of the exhibition. So I guess I would have to say also that it was important for me to think about this exhibition as a kind of a working environment in a way, right? And this was maybe one of the most direct ways in which that was materialized in the show. Then after the soap factory, this piece ended up being installed in several different contexts. We're still looking at a couple of new locations. I'm redesigning the platform so that it folds into a crate on the coaster so the thing can travel to different locations a little more easily. But when shown in a different environment, I sort of repositioned the ideas differently. We are basically printing that string of text throughout the run of the exhibition. So this is 2 different locations, but you get to see kind of different setups where the printing station is on the top floor there, and it continues to sort of rain down throughout the run of the exhibition. And then at the end of the exhibition, we cut it, and then we walk it outside. So these events that accompany this project, I call them Walkabout Sessions, where this one giant banner precedes in the space. And the way I like to think about this and ultimately think of this project is a kind of a cross between the news sticker on the bottom of the screen and the protest banner. And this idea of one becoming the other immediately is sort of like the dynamic of the day these days. So still one letter at a time, but in this case, this one giant piece. So this is just to give you a sense. You can see it sort of moving there down the street. And people pointed this out to me, that this is actually kind of an interesting protest dynamic too, that you don't disrupt the traffic, yet you have this incredible presence in the space. So back to the exhibition. This image I knew would have to be part of this exhibition, but I wanted it to be barely visible, so it's printed on this translucent silk material and lit in a way where it sort of is barely acknowledged visually. It's accompanied by a stack of these "We're Working All the Time" posters that had been part of my practice for years now. Those are the posters I brought for you. But I want to, for a second, backtrack and say that this message, right, I wanted it to be present in Chinese, acknowledging that original context, but diminishing its physical presence, while forwarding the English version of these 3 questions. And so these 3 objects on the wall are probably the most sort of traditional artworks in the exhibition, the only 3 things that are framed and hanging on the wall. And these are 3 tintype photographs of very small paper sculptures that I made, each sort of forwarding one of those questions. So who are you? What is this place? And why are you here? I was touching on the aesthetics of maybe small, these Victorian shadow box, maybe hair jewelry or small floral arrangement, artifacts, placing these questions in more strictly in a Western tradition, kind of celebrating them as these existential questions that they are. Near those artifacts I have installed these monitors just leaning on the wall, each showing a hand holding this hybrid tool, a work tool combined with a bell. This video just shows the hand holding them. You can see the heart of the bell drifting a little bit. There's no sound made, just the tension of possibility and the idea of acknowledging different types of work that could be happening using these hybrid tools. So you can see them on the screens here. The one with the knife was a much larger monitor and placed in a different relationship to the other 4. And you can see in the monitor a reflection of this piece, which is this massive conglomerate of these surgical drapes that I was talking about earlier. So you can see the pieces that are stitched together to create this drape for mass surgery. And these objects are incredible in a way that you have the smaller pieces with openings about this big. I'm not sure what surgeries. And then these larger pieces with the central opening that's about this big, maybe something that falls in a torso, and then these smaller, skinnier openings. God knows for what. So I love this sort of minimal painting object situation that is just saturated with meaning through the sort of lineage of these objects. And it connects to the other surgical drapes that are displayed on these pedestals. And those are the ones that literally probably the closest to what I proposed in the piece. Those are the ones that you can see people looking into those pieces of fabric displayed on the pedestals, because when you do look into it, you see this 12-foot chimney-like opening that cuts directly to that coal room underneath on the floor. You know, this specific one was a fairly large opening, so not only you could see the coal down there, but you could also smell and feel the cool breeze coming from the opening. This is the smaller piece that has a video project way at the bottom of the 12-foot of that aluminum pipe. So on the, as you approach the object, you don't necessarily know what you're looking at until you actually peer down that opening. Then there are several other pieces that were just presented on these small pedestals that were activated in performance events, both during the opening and later during the run of the exhibition. So this is also the performative object, and this couple of shots from the events itself. This is a piece called the Malignum Additum Puncti, something that I've done earlier, just a few weeks earlier in a different space, sort of attracted to the idea of creating a piece on two sides of the wall. So this, on one side of the wall, you have this table that I made this painting. There's a hole drilled right in the middle. There's a giant knot and a rope that goes right through the wall. On the other side, the same rope ties all these chairs and holds them up just by gravity, basically, right? It's the weight of the table on one side that holds the chairs, and it's the weight of the chairs that holds the table sort of attached to the wall by the force of gravity. And so for the soap, I did a vertical installation of that, where the rope goes right through the opening in the floor. And then underneath, the chairs are just hanging, and there's a live camera feed that shows the chairs that are underneath, right behind the table. So if you stand right in front of it, you see that continuity of the rope connected. And if you were, and I was really shocked to see that people were very bold and would, like pull on the rope, swing the chairs, and all that. You can then sort of understand the live connection happening there. And there's the two shovel pieces. These are called the search party projects. This is a search party version called the cognitarian version. Do you know what the cognitariat is? Have you heard that term? I know, it's weird. It's like the proletariat for the 21st century, where the people are just working with their minds. The cognitariat, that's us. So this is a cognitarian version of the search party. The set of brand new shovels that were colored according to this color scheme. These are held by these lovely medical grade holders for test tubes. And then there's the proletarian version, so the same number of old shovels that I have a thing for shovels. I collect shovels, and so these are distributed in the last gallery, the Gallery 3, which to me is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum to the in-your-face quality of the prints in Gallery 1. In this case, a very whisper-like, subdued presence of these shovels. Each had a custom little coffin built for its particular proportions, so you'll see that each have a sort of slightly different shapes. And then the thing that's happening, so you can see the video of the bodies continuing to roll through the space in this sort of bent wall. And then the text on the ground is hand rendered in salt, distributed very thinly on layers of tar paper, like asphalt paper that you use to tar the roofs of the houses. So the tar paper provides the black background, and then a very fine layer of salt is distributed on top of that. And these three texts that I had written are written out one by one, letter by letter, in this loose material, using this spackle, what is it called? Spackle knife, or what is this called? Spackle, right. So the idea there being that that the exhibition evolves over time. As people enter the space with their feet, they effectively disturb and ultimately erase those layers of meaning. 11 hours, I think, was the continuing time of just writing this out in the salt. And this is sort of a before and after, to get an idea of just how completely obliterated these texts ended up being. And like I said, there was a schedule of events that would punctuate the run of the exhibition. The opening itself had numerous performances. These amazing dancers that I collaborated with activated these altered surgical drape objects. I made some music, people picked up their posters, and that was that. Then there was an event called the Recitation of the Litanies, and that's the one day during which I was able to actually render this idea of the direct connection between the one person in Gallery 3, in the Salt Gallery, while I am down underneath shoveling coal. I couldn't do it for every day of the exhibition because, unfortunately, I was not on sabbatical during the run of the show. That was my plan. Didn't work out that way. But I did do it as an event, and my God, thank God it didn't work out for me to do it every day because it really was incredible. So this happened as an event for one day, and I had to rig up a special camera system, tiny lipstick cameras on the floor so I could see whether somebody was actually putting those headphones on. And I was able then to talk directly to them, and I would recite the texts that were written on the floor while shoveling the coal. And it happened on my birthday, and it was the sweetest thing. All right, so the part of the printer thing was that I wanted to also do a number of events where people would come together to make prints together. And so we made this giant, we're working all the time, banner for the outside of the soap factory as well. And I thought this was the kind of format and approach to this collective printing, to expand it, take it outside of the building. So that was one of the events. After this banner got destroyed within a few days. I got to make a much sturdier version of the banner for the soap factory. After that, this one was actually printed on canvas. Different design, a different version of it, but it did happen. And then the last event was sort of the closing performance, and this was the sort of intensity of the moment for me anyway, was that the soap factory was actually closing. The building is in some serious financial trouble right now. We're still trying to keep it alive, but part of it was the kind of a closing of the doors at the soap factory, where the staff people were sweeping the salt off the floor, and then Dustin Maxwell was the amazing dancer who was sort of playing a role of a character somewhere between one of the people who are sweeping the salt, but also articulating a different set of ideas during that event, while my daughter reads the texts that are being erased from the floor, and I'm providing some kind of sonic accompaniment to it. And then the resulting forms were sort of interesting and surprising to me as well, as they swept all the salt and put it in these coffins with the shovels. So kind of beautiful side effect of that process. Now here's the kind of amazing thing that I really do want to take a few minutes to talk to you about. So day after the opening, the weekend after the opening, in the morning I'm looking at the news, scrolling Facebook. It turns out that another shooting had happened. This time Jamar Clark had been murdered in Minneapolis, and people are organizing a demonstration that very afternoon. And so upset about the situation, like so many of us, where I made this post on Facebook saying, I realized I did have this printing machine, really. I could just bang out some banners for the protests right then and there. So I said, I finished my coffee, I got dressed, and I went to the soap factory. And by the time I was there, on the way there, I was trying to communicate with people. A few people showed up to help, and I said, just tell me what to print, and we'll print those. And so this is what ended up happening. We ended up printing these protest banners in the gallery. You can see this is happening in the middle of that project that I was showing you earlier. Through the entire afternoon, people were messaging specific texts for us. There were 3 of us in the gallery making these prints, and then people would just file into the soap factory throughout the day, picking them up, and then taking them back out on the street. So something really kind of unexpected and happened where that particular artwork ended up in a wonderful way extending its presence past the boundaries of the gallery wall. And as it is now, I literally just received another message from the Women's March requesting additional banners. So this is nearly 2 years since that exhibition. I've been printing these banners almost constantly. At this point, I've printed probably thousands of yards of material. I don't know how many individual impressions I had made, but there is something quite beautiful to me about the way in which the agency that was sort of built in the materiality of that project was seized by the necessity, the need that was there for this presence. It continues to this day, and for all the talk about or the questioning or wondering about whether a voice of an artist has any presence, does it change anything, does it matter, does anybody pay attention? I'm asking the same questions and wonder myself, but this particular situation was kind of an amazing experience, truly a learning moment for me, because kind of like with the spleen story that I was sharing with you at the dinner the other night, I constructed an artwork that delivered what I wanted it to deliver, but the audience somehow took ownership of the work itself, and in this case continues to use it to its own purposes. There's this kind of awesome quote, I think from Bakunin, one of the theorists of the Russian Revolution, who said that artwork should be able to stop bullets on the barricades. And I always liked the pathos of the quote. And it's interesting to me because I thought that he meant this as that the art in itself, that kind of cultural presence has the capacity to stop the goddamn bullets, right? It's a powerful tool, powerful medium. He didn't mean it like that. He literally meant that you got to go into the National Museum, drag the paintings and sculptures out, and build the barricades out of that, and that would stop the bullets, right? So it's a totally different idea of it, but it stays with me, this sense of urgency and agency. And I consider myself really fortunate, lucky, I don't know, that I had the chance to experience this somehow. In both cases, this and with the spleen hijack of the audience. something about both of those experiences becomes a thought at the back of my mind every time I put together a next project, whatever the opportunity is, to think about the porousness of the work, availability, pathways for the audience to enter and take ownership of the work in whatever way. This is one of those things that I think when constructing performative events, I didn't talk about the performances at all. There's not enough time to talk about everything, but the idea of constructing an experience that is designed to have people sort of get lost and lose track of whether they are just witnessing something or actually performing, actually enacting something important is something that I do pay attention to and look for in the work. This is the last slide in this set, and just to end this this portion of this, I just want to also show you that this is what I'm doing right now. I'm painting these plates. These are what I call the "you work, you eat" plates. Hold on, this is the other one, the Labor Camp Souvenir. I want to show you the very first one. This is the original plate that started this process. This is a plate that my daughter made when she was, I think, 8 years old. She took a ceramics class, and she was making a plate and asked me what I wanted it to say on the plate, and I told her to put this message on this plate. I think I vaguely remember some early Soviet designs that sort of manipulated the act of ingesting food with political indoctrination. So there's an element of that in those plates. And ever since she made this plate for me, I always wanted to make actual plates that would deliver this message. And so I'm sort of in the midst of this right now. Like the day before I came to Cranbrook, I painted this very plate. It's the last one in the series. There's a fresh stack of plates that I have. It's a little bit like these electric posters from like 20 years ago, where each one I'm trying to respond to particulars of the design of the plate itself. So some of them are much more subtle than others. Others have some crazy gold lettering happening in them. So just a very satisfying manual work. All right, questions? Yes.